Sir John Key, welcome to my podcast.
Well, that's quite a title, isn't it? Well, it's great to be here. Beautiful. It actually looks beautiful. You've got everything going on. And it's kind of nice that your name is so short because that fits in perfectly. So, it's all good.
Also, shorter name makes it cheaper for the neon sign as well.
Yeah, cheaper for the neons, yeah.
How are you?
Remarkably well, actually. I am having quite a cruisy life. I mean, I'm sort of... obviously doing some work still, but a lot of what I do, I'm on three boards of three different companies, either chair or I'm on them, and they're largely offshore, US related, and they can be virtual if I need them to be. So I'm not in that situation now where, when I was, say, for instance, on ANZ Group Board or chairing ANZ New Zealand, that was 17 board meetings a year and a lot in Australia, and I had to dedicate my diary around making sure I was in the right place. Now I can kind of be where I like and make them fit in. So I've actually got a really nice work-life balance now between that and travelling and playing golf and flying helicopters and doing all sorts of other different things. So it's a really good balance.
You say it's quite cruisy, but I think by most people's measure, it's probably quite hectic. But I think after the pressure of being Prime Minister, how many years were you PM?
8.
8. Yeah, after 8 years of that job where you're working, 18, 20-hour days, we'll get to that later. I'm guessing anything sort of seems cruisy.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And that's right. What makes it so much better now is this is the thing. I mean, I talked to Chris Luxon obviously a bit and so much of what he's doing, he'll send me a picture and I go, yeah, I remember I was there and I went there 9 times or whatever and I remember that person and all those things. It's a marathon. So you're out every night, you're away every day. You might even get home on a Wednesday night or something and it's 10 at night and you got to go and do some reading, so it's midnight and then you get up in the morning and you fly off to Palmerston North or something. So what I don't have now is I have lots of nights when we're home. Like Bronagh and I went for a walk this morning. Well, you're never going to do that when you're Prime Minister, or even in my previous working life. So we did that, and then I'm kind of busy today. I've got a few things on, and then tonight we're going out for dinner. And so you just have a life. You feel like you can do things, but for all of that, the things that I did. In my previous working career, where ultimately actually banking, but obviously clearly politics, you wouldn't trade it for anything. They were the most incredible, unique experiences, and I will be eternally grateful I ever did it. But it's nice having a bit of me time now.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I remember... So when you first became Prime Minister, whatever month that happened to be, you came in to see us at the Edge for a Christmas interview. So you're like 2 or 3 months under the desk. Yeah. And the biggest surprise you said at that time was just how much reading's involved. And I'd imagine it's one of those jobs where you're just always on the back foot.
Well, they basically deliver you a briefcase every day. And the briefcase sort of goes from points of importance. So it's what you're doing tomorrow. By the way, that's a good idea that you know where you are, what you're doing, who you're talking to, who you've met before, who you haven't, that sort of thing. And then there's all the things that are likely to blow up in the media the next morning. By the way, there's quite a few of those. And then it's, by the way, every stupid thing you ever said about whatever you're now in trouble with tomorrow. And then, but then it's just a mountain of paperwork that's coming. And that's every day. So of itself, if I gave it to you today and you went, okay, I've got to dedicate a couple of hours to that, I'll do that, you'd go, okay, well, that's fine. But it's every day. And people always ask me, what did you learn when you were Prime Minister? And I go, just how much the body can function with so little sleep. Because you're really in a permanent state of sleep deprivation. That's really where you're at. And it's funny, you wake up in the morning, you don't feel good. I think if you're really honest, you probably know when you go to bed, you sleep incredibly well because you don't have time actually to lie around there thinking about things. You just go to bed and you're exhausted. And when you wake up for the first 5 seconds, you don't feel great. And then you're into it and you're away. So... But there's a huge amount of adrenaline and stuff going on, and so that helps feed the beast. But certainly a decade of being in the job. I remember I think it was the Herald, the Dominion Post ran a series of pictures of me over a 10-year period. Now everyone ages, but man, I didn't look good at the end of it. I don't look any better now, but I certainly didn't look any good at the end of it.
But the aging thing happens really quickly. You see it with any leader, even Obama. I think he was like grey after a year.
Well, he's pretty grey now. I saw him at the Democratic convention. It's man, he's still an amazing guy. Got to be the best orator the world's produced in decades.
Oh, absolutely.
Great speaker. But they all age, and I mean, like Bill Clinton. Frankly, it's everybody. And if you're in that job for long enough, that's what comes with it. And as I said, I don't think it's. I mean, there are a lot of everybody ages. That's the thing. I mean, they just have a time series of you, and so it's easy to see. And you don't want to do this, but I went into Parliament in 2002, and if you have a look at some pictures of me going in and my maiden speech and stuff. I look really young, but I was 40. I'm 63 today. So some people come up to me and they go, "Oh, you're looking a bit rough or something." I go, "Yeah, but that was 25 years ago. Give me a break." So everyone looks a bit different over time.
Yeah. Oh, so what is your relationship with Chris Luxon?
It's really good.
Did you become friends when you were Prime Minister and he was head of New Zealand?
He was head of New Zealand. Yeah. So he used to ring me quite a lot. I always say to people like. In the time that I was PM, because I came from a very unusual route, I didn't really come from being a political person. I was green as grass. I mean, I wanted to do it, and I'd been a long-term member of the National Party, but that's quite different from working in the research unit, being around this thing, being actively involved. I was a business guy, and so then a lot of other business people saw me do that and thought, hey, I wouldn't mind being Prime Minister. Maybe I could do this. And of all the people that used to ring me or talk to me or contact me, he was the only one I ever thought would go all the way. And by that, actually give up the job, actually run, and actually do it. And he, honestly, he used to ring me at like 11:30 at night. I'd be in my office in Wellington, and he'd go, "I've just been watching Question Time, question 3. Why did you give that answer?" And I go, "Oh, for goodness sake, Chris, it's theatre. They're not asking a question they want an answer to. They know the answer. They just want to wind me up or wind everyone up." And so it's all about theatre. And so we've been friends for a very long time, and I'm, I don't want to say I'm his mentor because he runs his own ship and his own thing, but I'm probably one person he can talk to that at least has been there and knows what it's like, good and bad, and probably a person that can occasionally say to him, "Hey, I might actually change tack on that, or maybe do something different there," just on the basis that. You're in an unusual power position. I actually finally had it with my Chief of Staff, Wayne Eagleson, who I used to describe as the unelected Prime Minister of New Zealand. He was the one person that would come in occasionally and go, "Yeah, well, you might believe what you said, but tomorrow morning you're saying sorry and you're doing this and you're doing that, or you're wrong." And in the entire 10 years we had together, there was only once I actually disagreed and said, "No, I don't think you're right," and I did what I thought I was right. And I think on that occasion I was right, but it was 1 in 10 years. The other 999, I had to follow his advice.
Because I've noticed just recently, last couple of weeks, Luxon seemed. There's been times where he seemed quite snappy with the media, and part of me thinks has someone told him that he needs to be more defiant with them, or is he actually like seeing the red mist? Because you never did you?
No, look, it's your own style. I always sort of, right or wrong, took the view, the famous line, don't buy a fight with people who buy by the barrel. Like you can't win, you won't win, you can't win. And I had it once, actually. We were in the middle of, I think it was 2014, when .com was doing The Moment of Truth, which, by the way, there wasn't a lot of truth, as we now know. But anyway, and the media were obsessed with the whole thing, and then that book, and Hager had written yet another book, and it was all that stuff you forget. It was a long time ago. And so Stephen Joyce, who was our campaign manager, he said to me, "Look, what we're going to do with this press conference is you're going to do this stuff, and when you've answered 10 minutes of questions, at the end of that 10 minutes, I want you to get up and say, right, it's enough today, you're walking out." And I said, "Well, that's not what I've normally done. I've always just burnt them out." He said, no, but that's what we're going to do today. And I went, okay. And everyone agreed. So I said, fine. So I did that. And the headlines the next day were something like, Prime Minister rattled, Prime Minister angry, something like that. And I said to him, I'm not doing that again. I'll just burn these guys out. And it doesn't matter if it takes an hour and 10 minutes, I'll answer all their questions. Because I know the answer to every question they've got. They might not like the answer, but I know it. So mine was just sort of to say, look, okay, you can have a good relationship with them, and they may not always agree with you. But the really important thing to remember is that you can be doing an interview, and I might be doing an interview with John Campbell. And John Campbell is not going to be voting for the National Party and probably not a massive fan of my policies when I was Prime Minister. But I'm not talking to John Campbell. Like I'm not talking to you now, really. I'm talking to the people that listen to your podcast, right? And so that's just a vehicle for communicating to those people. And many of the people who watched John Campbell's show when you had Campbell Live or whatever, they were National Party supporters. You know, they might not have agreed with lots of things that John personally thought, but they were interested in the show, or they liked it, or they found it entertaining, or they liked him personally but didn't like, necessarily his policies or what he thought was right. And so when you get in there and you just give your, in a relaxed way, answer to the question, then that just gives them reassurance. They go, yeah, my guy's on top of that. That's his view. And it's like, I don't know whether you watched the vice presidential debate, but I thought J.D. Vance, who, like a lot of people think is the devil I sort of think, and he said a lot of things that, are way away from what I would believe, because I'm actually socially liberal, as you probably know, and economically conservative. He's obviously clearly very conservative. I thought he gave the masterclass yesterday because he did an amazing job. He's got an amazing backstory. If you haven't seen either the movie or his book, either read the book or watch the movie. A bit quicker on Netflix. Amazing backstory. And he did a great job of feeding that in and looking likeable. And I think in the end, that's what you're trying to do, I think, is to be relatable. So, I mean, but everyone has their own style. Chris has obviously decided I'm going to push back a bit harder, and that's fine too. I mean, it's whatever style you like. I mean, Winston's made a lifetime's work of it, including at the United Nations recently. So, hey, everyone's different.
Yeah. Since you brought up American politics, the time we're recording this, it's the first week of October.
Right.
You've blown up in the news the last couple of days for saying you're backing Trump or something? What?
No, well, what I said was I thought he'd win.
Right.
And I mean, to be fair, I said, look, it's 55-45. It's really close. I mean, this is the thing in the United States is we don't have first past the post. No, every vote doesn't count. We don't have, in New Zealand, we have MMP where every vote counts. So it doesn't matter whether you're a national voter living in Mangere. We're not going to win the seat, but that national vote counts because it's party vote that counts. In the US, it's just where you live. So that's why only half of all Americans vote. Because if you're a Republican in California, the Republicans aren't going to win the state, so you don't vote. And if you're a Democrat, half the time you go, well, they don't need my vote, so I don't bother. So half of them don't vote. So it's going to come down to those real swing states, those 6 sort of flyover Rust Belt states. Pennsylvania will be the big one because it's got 16 or 17 electoral college votes. And so it's really tight. But I think Trump, because Trump's personality is what it is, I think he underrepresents in polls because I think some people will vote for him thinking he'll be better for, border control or the economy or whatever it might be. Don't want to say to a pollster they're doing that. So I think he is a bit on the light side. I mean, it's really close. If it had been Biden, completely different story. But I think with Kamala Harris, it's much, much tighter. But I think he can get there. But, look, equally, I could convince myself it'd be the other way. But
does it annoy you though, like that your words still carry, even though you haven't been Prime Minister for however many years? You say something and it can sort of get twisted or turned and. It becomes like a big headline.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's sort of clickbait, isn't it, in the world that we live in? I mean, there's 2 things that surprise me more. And it happened this morning when I was literally, Bronagh and I went for a walk and then we had coffee. A guy came up to me and said, you did a fantastic job, wish you'd come back. And Bronagh goes, you've been out of this thing for 7 years. People are taking selfies of you every day and coming up to you. That happens literally every day. And it's a nice thing. I mean, it's really nice that people, would want you. I mean, I personally think Chris is doing a great job and the government's doing a great job, so I don't need to go back. But the point being that it's really nice that people do that. And I always say, the older I get, the better I was. So, it's like a lot of things in life. I think it's pretty like childbirth. Once you're through it, you can sort of remember the good bits, which is, the baby. Look, I think in that regard, I'm not. I am always surprised, but it's just been there. I don't know, and I've sat with Max. He will literally buy a site because he's a property developer, and it'll make the news. And it's like, why is that particularly newsworthy? It's not, but But the simple facts of life are, in the modern world that we live in, media needs people to click on their thing. And if you just go and talk to the Herald or something, they'll be quite honest. They'll tell you, look, when our name's there, people click on it. And I remember saying to the editor of the Herald one time, you're writing way too many articles about Max. It's a bit unfair on a young guy to be doing that. And he said, yeah, I know. But he said, it just goes nuts every time we put his name up. We just get a lot of hits. So they were quite honest about it. So. Yeah,
I had Max on the podcast about a year and a half ago. We had a great chat, and it's during those years when you were Prime Minister, he got you look at it, he got a raw deal. He was unfairly treated, really.
Well,
how old was he? He was a kid when you first became...
14, 15, that sort of stuff. I mean, you're younger. So, what it is was, first you got to remember, we were the first... family, if you like, for a while that had children. So Helen had been there for 9 years, but didn't have children. So it was a bit of a novelty at that point again for us to turn up with 2 kids that were relatively young. Secondly, it was the start of social media. And so, that wasn't around really in Helen's day. And even in my day, Instagram was the thing you put up a photo on at the very end of my time being Prime Minister. You weren't DMing people and all of that kind of stuff. And I mean, you weren't using, look at the modern world. I mean, the politicians of all stripes all around the world try and go around the mainstream media, not to be difficult because they hate them, but because that's how they connect via wherever it is, Facebook or TikTok or whatever platform they want. So that was all different. So there were many things. And then, to be fair, Max sometimes courted it a bit. He had periods of love-hate relationship with all, but times where he liked it. And Steffi is Steffi. She's an amazing girl, but she did cover herself in sushi and then photograph herself semi-naked. So that sort of thing does get the media's attention occasionally.
No. You look back in hindsight, that was rough. Steffi, it was an art project, and Max.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
In terms of hijinks or whatever you want to call it, that teenage boys getting up to, it was fairly low level.
Yeah,
but one thing the thing where he, I think it was a Snapchat where he yelled out to a cyclist, real men ride women. It was a dumb joke, but it was a joke by a teenage boy. Yeah. How do you hear about that? Do you hear about it from him or from the media?
It depended on the circumstances. Generally from him, but sometimes from my press secs, that would be like, wow, you're going to get that one. I mean, there were for the most part, I really defended them. And actually, the New Zealand public were amazing because they just sat there and went, well, our kids do that stuff, even if it was dumb or even if it was, a bit sort of, garish or young boy stuff. I mean, they go, yeah, okay, but our teenage son does that too, he's not on his own. And for the most part, they were great kids, they didn't do anything seriously wrong.
But something like that, are you telling him off? Are you on the phone saying, what the F are you doing?
There was one or two, I can't remember, it might have been that one or another one where I just said, look, that's just no. But for the most part, it would depend on the circumstance of what he was doing and what it was. But I mean, I remember when he came in that day and did a plank, and it was when planking was the big deal. And he was in the study and he yells out at me. I'd been in Parliament all week. I walk into the study and he'd set up the camera somehow in a way where he takes that photo. Apparently we were single-handedly killed planking. But anyway, worldwide or whatever. A little rough. But it was, and then that was days of it. And then we get in the spa one day, he takes a photo and I'm there, and I mean, it's not exactly like I'm naked, but I've obviously got togs on, so I mean, and stuff like that. I mean, when you look back on all of it, it makes you laugh, really. But at the time, some of it was like, so it was a bit draining. But it comes back to what you said. I mean, this is the problem, and this is what I always try and say to people when they go into politics. It's a weird world you're in because when you first go there, you're courting the media. You want to be noticed. You want them to, like you and to promote you and all that sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden, when you turn them on, just be careful because you can't turn them off. And but I remember we did commercial radio, which obviously
we loved having
JJ, Mike and Dom. And
you were our favourite Prime Minister out of all the sequence of Prime Ministers I've had.
Yeah,
Helen never played ball. Jacinda never wanted to play ball.
No, it was all I was stupid enough to do it. But the thing was, though, I always worked on the principle, look, again, if you go back to what I was saying earlier, you're really talking to the audience. I reckon there were a whole, hundreds of thousands of people that used to listen to your show who weren't actually that interested in politics, didn't really know much about me, didn't know really much about politics in general, but I reckon they would have come away and said, oh, he's a bit of a laugh, he seems like an okay guy, probably voted for us. So there was method in the madness in that you're just trying to show them your personality a little bit. And to be fair, I've kind of got that personality where I've definitely an A-type personality, obviously. So, it wasn't like I was trying to, I've got some dark personality and I was trying to turn it on when I was there. It just is who I am. And for the most part, it worked really, really well for me. And it was like, like when you build a bit of a following. I remember in 2014, like I said, that was the time when we had the .com thing in the book and everything. And it was like internally, it was feeling like, oh my goodness gracious, it was all feeling quite ugly. I remember ringing up Wayne, my chief of staff, and saying, this is nuts. We were trying to walk into malls on doing the walkabout during the campaigns. If we couldn't get through the double doors to get a little bit of space inside, the whole thing there was so many people come around us taking photos, and it was just crazy. It was like, honestly, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people trying to take photos. And I said to Wayne, look, I know when we do the stand-up every day, it's like you'd believe that, we're in so much trouble. It's not funny, but I said, it's like a rock concert out there. I've never felt anything like that. And to be fair, I had a lot of it over the time, over the sort of 10 years I was the leader and 8 years I was Prime Minister. I had a lot of it. But it was a great barometer. And I think by building that sort of, I guess, that personality, it just meant that if there was something negative in the media, people kind of could see around it. And I always thought, like, if I did a selfie with, some young person, and then they show it to their parents, and then they share it with all their friends and all that stuff, and then they go, oh, what was he like? And then they go, oh, yeah, he seemed really nice, and he took it off us and all this stuff. That personal support probably adds a lot more than an editorial, which might be negative about me, because most people don't read the editorial, whereas they actually listen to the Uncle Billy who met me somewhere and goes, oh, he was actually way better than I thought, or whatever.
Yeah, you were great. Like when there's one clip of you coming on our radio show singing the Mariah Carey Christmas song.
That's still a shocker, isn't it?
It's had millions of views on TikTok.
Millions.
When
and not in a good way.
when you did that, like, did Leslie, your press lady, like tell you off in the car afterwards?
No, I got a pacing. Yeah, but every time I put on a hat, I had to pay a fine. I literally used to just pay the morning tea fine before I even left in the week. I just go, like, here's the money.
What's that? What's the fine?
Every time you put on a hat, some stupid hat, they didn't like that, and because they knew the media would take a photo, and then they had another picture of me, and every year you go, they go no hats, and then they give me some hat, and I put the bloody hat on, and then I have to pay the fine, which was morning tea for the press secretaries. And so in the end, it's just basically it was a direct debit from my account. But again, it was like people. Yeah, I'll tell you a really interesting story. Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, she came to New Zealand. So she comes over and she's a great one. I actually think she's one of the great leaders, actually. I know there were one or two things that weren't perfect, but there was a hell of a lot right. And she led Europe, and she made Germany the strong man of Europe. Anyway, she comes out, and she was coming to the G20. And we were going, because we're the 53rd economy in the world, so we're not big enough to go to the G20. But we were going, and because if you're the host, you can invite your friends. So Australia had to invite us, and Tony Abbott invited us over. So we were fine. So Angela said, I'm going to come down to New Zealand. I'm going to come on the Thursday and Friday or something, and then we'll go over to G20. Which was in Brisbane. So I said, yeah, fine, all good. So she comes down here, and so I rang her up and I said, what do you want to do? And I knew her quite well, so I said, what do you want to do? She said, John, I don't want to do meetings. Let's just do one little, a meet and greet, a little thing, a press conference, but I want to do nature, because, the Germans love nature, right? A lot of the German tourists come for nature. So I said, okay. So we decided we'd take her to Motatapu Island and to release a kiwi, right? So anyway, there's this picture of her, and she's holding the kiwi. I think I'm standing next to her, and then she releases this kiwi into the wild. Anyway, fine. So that's the end of it. And there's tons of media and lots of people. We'd done the same thing with Prince William when he came out. Anyway, fine, all good. So anyway, on the Sunday, she comes over and she goes, John. I go, yes. She goes, the picture. And I go, what picture, Angela? She goes, the picture, me and the Kiwi. And I go, yeah, it was a good picture. She goes, that picture has had 5 times more views than anything I've done at the G20. This is like meant to be the 20 big leaders of the world, and people are looking at the picture of her with a Kiwi, right, in New Zealand. And that's the point, that most people in their lives, they just say to politicians, you get on with the hard stuff, good, bad, or indifferent. They're actually interested in human life. They're interested in, and that's why, celebrity pictures of their wedding or, I don't know, on the holiday somewhere, that sells because it's relatable. And the other stuff is just like, I don't know, what does the OECD stand for and what do they really do? I don't really know. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose there's some people that are like super, super hyper actively engaged in politics, but then there's that 80% in the middle that just...
Yeah, they just sort of roughly, good, close enough is good enough.
Well, these are great yarns. Hey, let's go all the way back. I've got a photo here to show you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, the State House, 19 Hollyford Ave. Yeah, I wanted to buy it actually when the government was selling them off.
Yeah, so let's talk about the early years. So values and lessons. So that you were born in Auckland. And
born in Auckland. Yeah.
You moved into 19 Hollyford.
19 Hollyford Ave was in Christchurch. So when I was about 6, I think, Dad died and had this massive heart attack, dropped down dead. And so Mum had gone off to the accountant and said, look, my husband's died, he's got all these businesses, I've got 3 children. And the accountant said, come back in 2 weeks. And he basically said, you want the good news or the bad news? And she said, no, I'll take the bad news first. And he said, you're broke. She said, ooh, what's the good news? And he said, well, I'm not too bad of an accountant, I can get you out of quite a bit of stuff. And Mum said, nah, that's not really how it works. So she sold the family home, sold up all the businesses, sold everything, and moved us to Christchurch, which is how we ended up in the infamous kind of State House, which was 19 Hollyford Ave. So, I remember her being there. But, the interesting thing with this was we stayed there. My other sisters are older than me. So Liz went off to London. Sue was 3 years older than me. Eventually, did what all people did. Young people did in those days, got a job at 16 and then, went overseas. And I convinced Mum was a great worker, and she was a cleaner. So that was the only thing. She was a night porter because she could do something when I was in bed literally at night, and she could go off and work and leave my sisters there at the time. And then later on, she was a cleaner, but she saved enough money to buy herself an ownership flat. So she moved out of this. She moved to 160 Highstead Road. Actually, I think it was. Yeah. But yeah.
What are your recollections of your dad?
Virtually none. I know it sounds really weird.
Sad.
Yeah, but Dad was his second marriage. So we had 2. I got 2 half brothers. One of them passed away actually. But so Dad was quite a bit older than Mum, and they'd met after the war. So they'd come out to New Zealand. So weirdly, I have one memory of him. And he gave me some toy, and I think he was in trouble with Mum, so I think I remember the row. And to be fair, he drank a bit too much, if you know what I mean. So there was a few issues, but yeah, I virtually no memories of him. And Mum just sort of, when Dad died, Mum just sort of really moved on. She never remarried, and she was an incredible person. I mean, she was this Austrian Jewish refugee, had got out when the Nazis invaded out of Austria. She always used to say to me, look, John, you get out of life what you put into it. And, you can sit around with every excuse you want, but ultimately you're the master of your own destiny. And it was that and really education. She used to say, look, they can take money away from you. They can do all of these things, but ultimately they can't take your drive and they can't take your education away from you. If you have both of those things, you can make it work. And so many people, when I was Prime Minister, used to come up to me and go, yeah, mate, I grew up in the State House, I did this, and they were massively successful. So, which is not to say it's an easy life for someone. So I understand completely how hard it is for youngsters that might find themselves in a difficult position. But I do think, ultimately, if you want to make it, you can and you will. Even today, and as difficult as this, you can and you will.
Oh, I love that. That's such. I had a guy on the podcast a couple of months ago called I don't expect you to know the name, but Abaz Nazari, and his family were on the Tampa.
Oh, they're on Tampa, yeah.
Yeah. So they I think John Howard didn't want them in Australia, so they were on
they came over to New Zealand. Yeah,
and he learned the English alphabet in a refugee centre in Mangere, and now he owns a couple of businesses. His dad, who was stripped of his identity and everything, and he came to New Zealand with nothing, now has a car parts business in Christchurch with 20 staff. Like every single family member's done exceptionally well from this state housing environment and the opportunity they were given in New Zealand.
Yeah, and that's what you see on migration. I was always pro-migration. So when people don't like migration, it's generally speaking not that they're a bunch of racists. I mean, you can obviously get people who might be like that, but as a general rule, New Zealanders are actually not racist, and they get on with their neighbours and they like their workmates and all that sort of stuff and all the rest of it, right? What they don't like about migration is if they think that the social services they rely on, the school they send their child, the hospital they might need to go to, the road that they drive on, if they think they're overpowered by lots of people coming in, they don't like that, right? And we basically have legal migration in New Zealand. So the big debate in places like the UK with Brexit or the United States with this build the wall and all that sort of stuff, that's all driven off illegal migration. But there's this massive sea around New Zealand, you might have noticed, so it's quite tricky to get to. And so basically our migration's legal. So we can control the tap. And see, what I used to say to people is, look, it's good if you bring capital as a migrant. So these people who come and they build businesses and they're fantastic. It's good if you bring skills and high level of education. Again, fantastic, you can fit in. But most of all, bring the attitude that you want to make New Zealand your home and you want to work hard. And I mean, you can pick any combination you want, right? I mean, but okay, take the South African population. There's a huge number of South Africans that have come to New Zealand. A lot of them live in Auckland. Last time I looked, I didn't see many of them being unemployed. I mean, they work hard. They're entrepreneurial. They frankly, they might still support the box, and that's about it. And by the way, we're beating us a bit more than they should be. But the Filipinos. I mean, you go to any hospital and show me how the place would operate without Filipino nurses and things. So, what are these people bringing? They're bringing because you're a migrant and because you have to give up so much from where you were to make a new place home, you have to give up your family half the time and your friends and the things that make you feel comfortable, from foods and drinks and newspapers and all that sort of stuff. I mean, of course, in the modern world, a bit more of it's portable, but not as much as it was, or not nothing like being there. It takes a certain personality to do that, and that personality breeds in you a determination. And that's why, look at the number of Asian parents that really push their kids. Now, you can say maybe they're pushing them too hard and, there's too much, study after school and ballet and all that stuff. But in the end, they're doing that because they came from a highly competitive place. They gave up everything to be here, and they are literally dedicating their life for their children. And those children are very often going on to being partners of law firms and surgeons and whatever. So that's kind of why I'm pro.
Well, it kind of goes back to the mantra from your mum, eh? You get out what you put in.
Yeah, and she was like that. She was hard. Like my mother was very, very European in that regard. You know how I don't know if you watch F1, but like Max Verstappen. Most people don't seem to like Max Verstappen. Actually, we went to F1 in Singapore for a semi-work and obviously a lot of fun. And I like Max Verstappen, and I get it that some people don't because he sounds a bit gruff or whatever. But he's just that, those sort of Benelux type countries, basically Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, that they are a bit more abrupt sometimes. But they're just telling you what they think, and they don't even mean it in a way we might sugarcoat it a bit more. But in a lot of ways, I'd rather you tell me what you think. I mean, it's actually fine. I mean, I can live with it. It's probably if you tell me one thing and mean something different that I probably don't like.
Yeah, absolutely. So you wanted to be. You had like aspirations to be Prime Minister from a real young age.
Yeah,
like 10.
When I was about 10. Yeah.
10. What did you associate with the job at that age? Did you associate money with it?
Power. Well, I think, okay. It's power and opportunity and money and glamour and all of those things. Like these are the days where New Zealand have one TV channel. Oh, by the way, we're getting rapidly back to that situation. But yeah. And so you watch the news, and Mum was a massive sort of I guess it was probably that generation. Mind you, we're still the same. We still watch the 6 o'clock news and we watch both channels. But she watched the news and I was always sort of interested. And she loved political debate. She actually liked the discussion about things. And she was, like I said, my mother was very socially liberal. And actually more Labor than National because she, the State House and all that sort of stuff. But basically, she was quite happy to have the discussion, like she was interested in that. And so I got interested and then I just watched it. And I think, look, your motivations, when I ran, I was 40. So your motivations for becoming a MP and hopefully one day Prime Minister at 40 is very different from a 10-year-old, But you have to have that. You have to have enough of an ego to really, ultimately, when you do it, to really believe you can change things and make a difference. And by the way, you're right, And but when you're 10, I think it's just you look at it and you go, wow, and it's like
it's the biggest job in the country.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
And nowadays it might be a little bit different. Maybe you want to be Tay-Tay or something else. But I can't sing. Oh yeah, that's right. You know that because I've been on your show. But I did have headphones on and no music, just for the record.
Oh, God, it's
like the three-way handshake. That was nothing to do with me. The French guy came over the top.
We'll get into that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you even wrote to the Prime Minister at the time.
I wrote to Bill Rowling. Yeah. And he wrote back. And that was one of the reasons when I was Prime Minister, I used to write to every single young person that wrote to me. And the correspondence unit, you have 4 people in the correspondence unit, 4 or 5 people, and they are answering everything. Now, some of them might be if there's a generic campaign going on about climate change or whatever. But, kids would go to school and they'd study Parliament or they'd study, Hector's dolphins or Maui dolphins or whatever, and then I'd get hundreds of letters. But every child I'd write back with this little card that had a picture of my face on the front of it, and I'd write, dear Katie, hope school's going well. Thanks for writing to me, John. And I, honestly, it'd be 1 a.m. I'd be in my office in Wellington. Every single light would be out except the 9th floor. I wasn't trying to make people feel sorry for me. And then I'd put that little silver fern pin in it, and I'd do hundreds of these play things. But I did it because when Rowling wrote back to me, I always thought it just felt special, and I thought, it was a different world. But I just respected the fact. I didn't, obviously, it's not my style of politics, but I just respected the fact he'd done it, so I did it.
No one sees that, eh? No one sees you sitting in the office at 1 a.m.
No. Well, that's the thing. That's the thing that they don't realise. I mean, when you see these sort of arguments around, MPs' perks or whatever, I mean, look, you can never win those arguments, and actually, I got the thing from the they write you a letter as a former Prime Minister, and if you're the spouse of a former Prime Minister, you have all these entitlements, and you can imagine what it'd be like if I took those things over the life. I never took them when I was Prime Minister, let alone now. So I got the thing yesterday from the Internal Affairs writing to me, telling me that one of the, they name everyone. So someone, because they're going to release it publicly, and one person's out at like $36,000. I was $56. To this day, I have no idea what the $56 was. But anyway, the point being, you can't win those arguments. But yeah, people don't realise actually these people are working ridiculous hours because you see the little bit you see. You don't see them going off to every school fair or calf day or a million different things that they're required to do. It doesn't matter whether you're the most junior backbencher. They actually work insane hours, really. And it's a little bit like, it's become a thing in the media now to bag the civil service when they go off to some conference somewhere and they're going business class, apparently. Well, okay. Fair enough, I suppose, if people want to argue that. But seriously, we're a $350 billion economy. The government, I mean, in my opinion, spends too much, although the current government's doing a good job of trying to reduce that. But we probably spend $100 billion a year. I mean, if we can't send the head of a government agency to a conference business class, we've really lost the plot. I mean, the point being that, you can make an argument about whether they should go to a conference, but then I'd make an argument with you that, again, I'm not trying to defend the civil service, but but they have big responsibilities. These are like, in essence, very, very big organisations. You want them to be engaged in what's happening around the world. So sometimes we've got to get over ourselves a little bit.
Yeah, well, also, like having our, I don't know what the plane's called, but our version of Air Force One that breaks down all the time, it's embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, the truth is that, no Prime Minister yet's had the gumption or whatever to change it. And they're going to have to change because the 75's a pretty old plane, so I suspect that'll get changed at some point. But
So you finish school and you become you do an accountant's degree. Was that sort of like a planned pathway to being Prime Minister?
Well, planned by my mother, not to be Prime Minister. But No, I had numerous occasions where I'd said to her, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I mean, like literally, go back to school in those days. You learnt French or German, right? That's what if you didn't do that, you did commerce, basically accounting or whatever, right? I remember coming home and saying, right, well, I'm going to learn German. And Mum and her are very Austrian accent goes, that's a bloody waste of time. I go, yeah, okay, well, maybe if you taught it to me, then I could do both. She goes, no, there's a waste of time too. So you will do your accounting. And my friends would come over and get tutoring from my mother in German. She wouldn't teach me German because she said that is a complete waste of time. You're never going to use that. By the way, it would have been quite useful when I met Angela Merkel, although she speaks perfect English. But the point being, she said, no, you're going to be a business person. Well, she always used to say, son, there are two types of people in the world, doers and payers. You are most definitely a payer. So get a decent education. By the way, that means you're going to be an accountant. So every time I came home with an alternative thing I might do was say, no, you're going to be an accountant. And so I didn't even want to do accounting, and I'm hopeless at it, although I can read a balance sheet now. But anyway.
Oh, no, but you did all right. So then, so you become an accountant, then you become a currency trader, and there's if you go to New Zealand on screen, there's a documentary there called Big Dealers.
Yeah, the day in the life of foreign exchange dealers.
This is you at 25.
Yeah, me with the glasses. Look, I know.
You were saying before how you've aged, but I reckon you've aged well. You've had a glow up. When did the glasses go?
Yeah, well, the glasses went. Well, funnily enough, actually, I had a thing called. I didn't care about the glasses as in like my then Bronagh married me. It was all too late anyway. But I didn't care about the glasses per se. But if I went into sport, like I quite like sport. So if I went for a run or I did anything, played golf or you used to annoy me, that. So I. In the very early days, I did a thing called PRK, which I think is radial chemotottering, but it was a way they did it before they lasered your eyes. Nowadays, they laser your eyes. If you're long-sighted, can't see. Short-sighted, can't see distance. So, and I went in. It was really early on, and the guy who was my surgeon, we were great friends. And we'd gone through antenatal class together. I was in London. He was so particular about it. He checked out the serial number of the machine that they were doing. Anyway, it was a really amazing thing. They burn off the front of your eye where the thing goes click, 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 and you can smell a burning smell, and that's actually your cornea or whatever being burnt off. Oh. Anyway, the crazy thing about it was I remember going in. It was quite new technology, and we went in, and I was booked in at 4 p.m. on a Friday, and by then, we were in London. We had 2 kids. The kids were young. It was like any household with 2 young children, and Bronagh was sort of at home, and it was chaos and all this sort of stuff. So anyway, I go along to this PRK thing, and there's 3 or 4 other people who are doing it, and they're all with their families literally having prayer sessions in the waiting room, and I'm there on my own catching a cab home with something thing over my eyes, and oh my God. But anyway, I had all that done, and then the glasses went, so
Yeah. And then, so before so you obviously were doing quite well as a currency trader, like in that documentary, which I think is the mid-'80s.
Yeah, that was at Elders Merchant Finance. So what happened was, in 84, Labour came in, and Longy appointed Douglas as finance minister, and Douglas did the right thing, actually deregulated New Zealand. It was the only way through, and that saw a floating of the exchange rate, and that's when I came in basically then. And then I started with Elders Merchant Finance, but pretty rapidly went to Bankers Trust, and I was in Bankers Trust till 1995, and it was then that I realised I kind of ran out of runway really, and I was going to go to Singapore, and the ultimate they wanted me to go to New York with Bankers Trust, but I ended up going with Merrill Lynch, and that was Merrill I stayed with until I came back to run. So it was 20 odd years of investment banking. Yeah.
What sort of money were you earning in the mid-'80s? You were driving like a nice, it looked like a nice BMW for its time.
Well, that was the crazy thing. I think those days, in the early days when it first started, there was no one in that industry. So it was like, it was the hot thing to do. And to be fair, we had a pretty good track record, and I kind of worked for me. It just suited my personality. So I think I was getting, not a long way short of $1 million. I think I went to Bankers Trust for $1 million a year. And that was like 1989. Yeah, I know. It was crazy. I mean, we bought the beach house at Omaha. We bought it for cash, and it was we bought the section and built the house, and it was $350,000 the first round. We bought it for cash, and we'd already bought a house in Remuera and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I mean, by the time I left, I mean, it was the biggest salary drop in history, going from that to being a backbencher in Parliament.
Yeah, what were you on at Merrill Lynch when you finished up?
Oh, millions and millions. Yeah.
Really?
Millions. Yeah.
So
why do that? Yeah, no.
I mean, it worked out all right, but you're rolling the dice in a big way. Like, everyone...
Yeah, and I nearly didn't make it. I mean, I came in 2002, which was the worst result Nationals had. I'd only just won the challenge to win Helensville, which, by the way, was a lot more tricky than anyone had ever thought, because I was so green, I thought challenges happened all the time. They never did. And the whole thing was, so yeah, if you sat there today and said, okay, I'm going to map all this out and you're going to take that risk, you would say you've got rocks in your head. Like when I went in to resign, I went in, I think in 2000 or something, to tell Dave Kamansky that I was going to at Merrill in New York, because I was quite senior, so I wanted to give them lots of time. And it wasn't like I was going off to Goldman Sachs or something. So I just went in and say, hey, look, I'm going to go back, I'm going to retire, I'm going to run for politics, and I'm going to retire at the end of 2001, right? And he just looked at me and he went, John, my boy, you are having a midlife crisis. I'm going to send you to run Australia. I went, well, okay. I said, well, I don't think I am having a midlife crisis. But then they came back about 2 weeks later and they said, we want you to stay, and we want, for the whole of the investment bank, we want to make you global head of sales. And that was across everything. That was, all of the different businesses. And that was a huge job, and that was a lot of zeros. And I remember going home to Bronagh going, this is absolute lunacy, because I'd actually do that job really well. And but I'd made the decision I was going to go, and I just got in my head that I was going to do it, and I did it. But if you really sat back and looked at it, you would say
it was a brain explosion.
It was mad. It was totally mad.
Oh my God.
But then you'd look at it today and see Merrill Lynch eventually went bust. So who knows how much stock I would have lost, and who knows what would have happened, and you never know. And then by the way, I've got these irreplaceable things, and I think, I don't want to be morbid about these things, but I think, when they're finally lowering me into the ground, or actually I'm getting burnt, but, the principle's the same. When it's all over, do you think I'll really, look up and go, I should have earned another $20 million or $30 million, or do you think I should have done what I did? And I'll always believe I should have done what I did. So it's like money's. Look, my mother used to say money doesn't bring happiness, and I used to say it sure as hell helps. And I was a really economically driven Prime Minister, not because, despite what a lot of people might say, I wanted to advance the causes of rich people, because actually rich people can look after themselves. They don't need the government and they don't need me. But it was because I wanted to make more people financially independent, because there's nothing worse than actually not being able to pay the bills and feeling frightened and, having your whole life, living from paycheck to paycheck. And you can argue the case about how you make that happen. I've got a particular economic prescription. Some will agree with me, some won't. But I kind of learned that, but on the other side of the coin, money's only value in exchange, right? Like it's what you can do with it. I mean, the richest guy in the graveyard's not necessarily the smartest guy, right? I think it's about what you did with your life, and so me at our stage in life, and everything might change, but in our stage in life, with the amount of financial resources we've got, more money probably wouldn't make any difference, because I'm not sure I'd do anything different. We like our houses, we have the hobbies we want, we drink the wine we want. You can only eat a couple of meals a day. This is just a limit to what you can do,
When I had Max on the podcast, he said you were sort of like you and Bronagh were sort of like tight asses growing up. Like you made him get a job at McDonald's.
Yeah, well, that's what he says. He reckons he was the poorest little rich kid. Yeah, okay, well, good one. Yeah, but the point was, okay, I reckon throwing heaps of money sometimes at these really young kids, I don't know if that's a great idea. You know, like I think that can, you're just asking for potential trouble. And then secondly, by the way, life wasn't that bad. His first car was a brand new Polo, and so he had a pretty nice life. But yeah, we did make him do that. But to be fair, see, you can criticise Max and Steffi for anything you want. I mean, no kids are perfect, and boy, we're not perfect parents. So, okay. But what you don't think you can criticise them for is work ethic. Like both of them. Like she's extremely artistic and doing really well, and he's really talented as well. But there are many things, but they're not lazy. They try hard, they work hard, they're quite entrepreneurial. Yeah. And so all you're trying to do is instill in them that belief that they can do what I said earlier, change their own lives. And in the end, they'll decide what they want to do. You're not going to make Steffi some incredibly financially focused person. She's always going to have that incredible artistic flair, and that's just her. She's actually more entrepreneurial than she might want you to believe, and she's doing really well. And she's designing jewelry now and doing, she's really talented. But and Max has always been much more business interested. But yeah, all you're trying to do is do that. So I mean, to me anyway, like you make your choices, and they're not always sane, but that was a choice I made. And you know what, it worked out.
Yeah, and Max told me like you. Are you a fan of like manifestation? And he said you used to like talking to the mirror and
you would
like manifest becoming prime minister.
Yeah. So it's more about the way I would describe it would be visualization. So I reckon if you when I was leader of the opposition, I became in 2006 and won the election in 08. So I think certainly that last year, in the 08 year, I think I literally got up every morning and went, in 191 days I'll be Prime Minister, in 190 days I'll be Prime Minister. And I think if you can't visualise yourself being there, you'll never get there. It's like on a golf course. The greatest putters are not – the technique is no better. Nothing's better. They just feel the ball going in the hole. They just think they're going to. Apparently Trump, I don't want to bring him up again. Apparently Trump's like that. Apparently he's annoyingly so. But apparently when he putts, he just goes, I'm the greatest putter of all time. This is going in the hole. And apparently half time does. So I don't know. But to me, see, if you can't perceive yourself to be there, you're never going to get there because there's always going to be someone else you believe that could be better or take your place or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about professional sport, but the difference between a Dan Carter and a whole lot of first fives that didn't make it, or a Richie McCaw and a whole lot of All Black captains that maybe didn't do as well. I mean, is it ability? I mean, maybe. I mean, but you're talking about degrees of, at the absolute elite. Yeah, I mean, they're right up there anyway. It's more about just they believed. And if you talk to Richie, I think they got everything from the SAS to all these sorts of people. And after they lost in 07, before the 11 campaign, they got all these people in there to role model and to role play all of the different scenarios, including the one they found themselves in, which was, they were leading by a point with, 10 minutes to go. And he reckons that they thrived off, I don't know, I had an election to win 4 weeks after that, so I wasn't thriving off that 15 points, so he would have been better. But anyway, I get it. But yeah, to me, that's a lot of what I've been about, that I just, and yeah, I don't know. I think I just don't know. I think if you don't have that, I just don't know how you kind of get there. Because, I used to say to young people all the time, I tell you why most young people don't really go all the way and do everything they're capable of doing. It's not because of their own fear of failure. You might think that's the case, but it's actually not that. Most people can live with giving a go, whatever it might be, running a marathon like you do or whatever, and maybe not making it to the finish line. They're worried about what other people will think about them failing. And so I always used to say to them, look, don't worry about that. Okay? The fact, actually, the very people that you're worried about maybe your parents or your friends will be incredibly proud of you that you actually gave it a go. And mostly, by the way, you learn from little failures along the way than you do actual, it's like the All Blacks. They learn more when they lose than when they win.
Yeah, failure's a stepping stone to success.
Success, yes.
And also, as you get older, you realise everyone's thinking about themselves. No one's actually thinking about you as much as what you think you are.
Exactly. You think about a lot more. You are convinced that everyone's going to see it and remember it, and they just don't. They just don't. They take very little of it in, actually.
Yeah.
I think, look, you get one shot at this thing. Give it everything you got.
Yeah. So and it worked. You became Prime Minister. That's the photo of the day.
We're all in blue. There we go. Look at that, eh?
Yeah. But you look at Max. He's a little boy there, and you reflect on the hard time he had from the media, and it was rough. But what are your recollections of that time? So
I think he went to short. I think he wore shorts that night. Election night 08.
So what happens when you become? So Helen Clark had been Prime Minister for three terms.
Yeah.
And then that was the day you became Prime Minister. Do you know what you're doing? Do you have like a? Is there a handbook? Or?
No, there's no handbook. Although I remember, for the first month of when I was Prime Minister, people, because the bureaucracy will only call you Prime Minister. Even ministers only call you Prime Minister. I mean, like Wayne, as my Chief of Staff, might call me John if there was just me and him. I think most of the time he just avoided calling me anything. But in front of everyone else, he'd only call me Prime Minister. And we're great mates, But for the first month or 2 months, people would go Prime Minister. I'd look over my shoulder for Helen Clark and realise they were talking to me, But it's an incredible system, eh? You walk in day one, I kid you not, you have your own bureaucracy when you're Prime Minister called Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, DPMC. And my head of DPMC was, these days, Sir Martin Weavers. And Martin was fantastic. I'd been an ambassador for us in Japan and various other places, very senior in foreign affairs, had been the foreign affairs advisor to David Longy, had some most amazing David Longy stories. Fantastic guy. And you literally walk in day one and they go, right, well, Prime Minister today, you need to deal with these things. It's like she left the building on Sunday afternoon and you walked in on Monday morning, and it's completely seamless. And that's why we have a neutral public service. In theory, you wouldn't know who they vote for. And frankly, Martin may have voted both ways. I don't know. And that's not what they're about. What they're about is providing you the best advice they possibly can as Prime Minister to do the job as best you can. And it's brutal in some ways because you're literally, when you're leaving, you're packing the boxes and you're gone the next day. And so much of what comes with that is the office of that. And I think it just is the way it is, and I think go and ask Chris Hipkins, he'll probably tell you, one day he was Prime Minister because Jacinda resigned, obviously, and all of a sudden he's in this big office and there's all these things around him, and now he's leader of the opposition and he's fighting for scraps on the last column inch of a story. And that ain't a lot of fun.
Did you have any sort of imposter syndrome at that time, or you just didn't have the time? Or
too much ego, ask Max. Look, you don't. I tell you what's weird when you're Prime Minister. Everyone assumes you have perfect knowledge. They just assume you have a briefing paper and everything. Look, sometimes you'd watch CNN and you'd go, "Oh, that's more interesting than the paper I just got on that particular topic." But
you do. You have to be over everything. Like you can't speak to Jack Tame or Mike Hosking or John Campbell and say that's a good question. Let me get back to you on that.
Yeah, that's right.
You need to know everything, don't you?
And that's right. So you've got to be an inch deep and a mile wide. Which, by the way, you pick up when you're there because by osmosis you're sitting around listening to a whole lot of conversations and and you learn a lot of stuff. You know a little bit about a lot of stuff. You don't know necessarily a lot about it, a lot of stuff, but you know a little bit. I don't know. I don't think I really did. I mean, I got a pretty healthy ego, so I think I was fine. But yeah, it was one of those things where it's definitely very different. And when I retired and I became chairman of ANZ, I appointed Antonio Watson as CEO. And I said to Antonia the same thing I'd say kind of to anyone going into a leadership role, which is I just said to her, just remember, you'll never regret the things you did. You'll regret the things you didn't do. And by the way, it'll go a lot faster than you think. Now, there were one or two things I did that I might have regretted as well. But as a general rule, I don't really regret things.
What are they? What are the biggest regrets? Are they things that you did or things that you wanted to do and didn't do?
They're probably policy things that I might have wanted to do, really. I mean, I don't think you're going to change the personality and stuff. And a lot of me kidding around and stuff, it was good and bad. But it was part of probably the way I am, I think, more than anything. I think you are who you are. You can't actually create things like, and that's why I always say to Chris all the time. I say, you're not me, and I'm not you. You do. I might do one or two things better than you, but you do half a dozen things way better than me. We're different, and it's like, in the modern world now, eventually they're going to get rid of passports because they're just going to test your retina, or your walking gait, face on the fly is going to be the technology they're going to use. And you're just going to walk through an airport and you're never going to have a passport. Why? Because we have unique identifiers. They're our voice, or they're the way we walk, or it might be our eyes or whatever. And that's like any personality. They're unique identifiers. So I used to look at previously, it's like I spent lots of time looking at Helen Clark or Tony Blair or lots of different people. And I tried to learn from them, but in the end, I am who I am, and I just do things my way. And they're not always perfect or right, but they are what they are. And they just vary a bit.
Yeah, it's funny, just picking up on something you said before about some of the regrets of the fooling around things.
Yeah.
What do you mean, like the modelling for the 2011 World Cup volunteer? That was no big deal, though, was it?
No, none of them were really a major. But I mean, in hindsight, it was like, oh god. And we were just mucking around. You sort of, I tell you what happens is you live in this world where it's 24/7 scrutiny. So you'd think you'd be bright enough to have a brain engaged that every single thing you do would be scrutinised, right? Because you know that, because that's the world you live in. But you get so comfortable in that sometimes you're just kidding around and you don't mean anything by it.
Yeah, what else is it? There's a photo that went viral of you eating a hot dog, which...
Oh, yeah, I didn't care about that either. No. That was another one where I got fined by the press unit. But, I mean, oh my God, I gave away so much money it wasn't funny, yeah. I mean, there were just endless things that happened. But they were all part of that. I tell you what, they used to run a poll, and I'm not sure they do it anymore, but it was who you want to babysit your kids. And I used to win that poll hands down. And, okay, you actually wouldn't want me babysitting your kids. I'm pretty useless. But actually, I always took that as a good thing. I took that as a thing that people said, he's relatable. Because you want people to be relatable.
Too. People saying that they'd trust you with their kids.
Kids, massive. That's right, yeah. So I actually took it as a good thing. And actually, see, I find Chris Luxon, I find him, he's a thoroughly nice, really relatable person when you meet him. And I think what will happen is the more over time people get to meet him, more people will realise actually he's a really cool guy, and he's not what some persona that's been created by various versions of the media or political opponents. That is what it is. And that's the game, by the way. I mean, it's nothing unique to him. It's true of everyone in politics. But the more people get to meet you, the more... you've got a fighting chance they might like you and vote for you.
Yeah. There's another photo of you that went viral with Harrison.
Yeah. That kid, that was a classic, yeah. You got a good chunk of my cheek. Well, I always said to Chris Luxon, you're one screaming baby away from a nightmare.
That's a great photo.
It would happen all the time on the campaign trail. Honestly, you go, because you're always constantly in shopping malls and different things, and so young mums all the time would come up and go, would you want to have a photo with Billy or whatever? And you'd pick up Billy, and 98% of you would just be, please don't cry. Because if you cry, that's going to be the bit on TV tonight. And so many of them were like, they'd go and they'd gar and they'd be totally fine. But everyone themselves, they'd get a bit frightened, and they would. And then that would make the news.
How is your mental health over this time? Like, I've heard you say in other interviews where, the advice you give to your kids is, in regards to social media, is not to read the comments and stuff. But when you're Prime Minister and everyone's having a go at you, or it seems that way.
Yeah.
Like, how do you look after your mental health?
Yeah, and I wish I had a better answer than this, because I think mental health issues are a massive issue. I think, I actually went to a lunch with John Kerwin, who's been doing some amazing work in that space last week. And I think everything from COVID to social media has made it worse. I think there's an enormous amount of young people that believe, in their mind they'll be telling themselves they're the only person that's got that, but actually what they've got to take is some comfort from the fact that they're in the majority, probably not the minority, and it's nothing to be ashamed of or frightened of. But it's really hard to get help, actually, man. It's really hard to get help. And we did lots on mental health in my time too. I know people might not believe it, but we spent ages on, very focused on youth suicide and anorexia and all sorts of different versions of mental health disorders. But I was just really lucky. There's something about my personality that it just wasn't a thing that I never felt depressed. I never felt so under the pump that that I was that I was in some form or another in trouble or was causing me any issues. But what I did do is what I said to Max is I never bothered reading the comments, because if you read the comments, they're largely keyboard warriors that blah blah. And then secondly, I used to have a once-only policy. So I'd try and read as much as I possibly could, and it becomes so much you can't. But I'd try and watch or read everything once, and it was once only. Because if it's good and you watch it 5 times and you go, oh, that's great, that person really liked me and they wrote all these really nice things, then you start believing your own PR. But if you read all the really negative things all the time, then what's the point in doing that, because it's only going to kind of depress you. And then I'd also try and take a lens. So I could name for you some journalists who write in the Herald, and some of them are really right-wing, and what they write is largely very supportive of me, and some of them, it wouldn't matter what I did, they wouldn't have liked what I did. So there's no point in taking the bad ones and going, oh, I'm having a bad day, because, by the way, they don't like me anyway. This is the starting point. They don't agree with my policies. They don't agree with where I'm coming from. So actually it's a waste of time, right? And so I just ignore them. And sometimes these people would write this stuff, and you can, and I just go like, the loser is them, not me, because actually if they think they're affecting me, they're not, because I'm not even reading it. And sometimes when I was Prime Minister, people come up to me and they go, oh, I feel so sorry for you, the media. And I go, oh, yeah, it's all good. And just sort of carry on. Now, yeah, I mean, it's like anyone. I suppose, if you get cut, you bleed. I mean, I understand that. But and a lot of it I just took on the chin and said, look, these people have to fill up column inches, they have to fill bulletins, they have to do stuff. And it depended who they were. Like someone like John Armstrong, who's was the chief political reporter at the Herald for a long time, has died unfortunately. Had Parkinson's, but had a brilliant mind. He led the parliamentary press gallery. If you go and ask Paddy Gower or Duncan Garner or Guy and Espiner, they'll say when John Armstrong was at his prime, when he wrote things, he was everyone followed him. I just found with someone like John, he was very, very balanced. So if he liked what I was doing on that particular issue, he'd give me credit for it. If he thought I was on the wrong place, but I was coming from the right execution or whatever, he'd give me some credit for it. And if he thought I was wrong, he'd say I was wrong. But at least he was balanced, and so I'd follow John because I'd say, okay, he's got a point. But I used to call John every single Friday that I was Prime Minister, every week. And sometimes twice or 3 times a week. And go, hey, I just want to give you a bit of background of this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is the logic of what's happening. So, yeah, I mean, most of the other stuff I just didn't worry about. It's just, I don't know. It's just the nature of the personality. It's just not something that's affected me, and it's not that I'm. It's not that. Yeah, exactly. It's not that I'm better than anyone else. I'm definitely not. Yeah. It's just it's never been a thing with me that. And I think it was like even when I was a trader, I was under huge amounts of pressure, running massive amounts of risk. It just, I don't know. Just my personality seems to feed on it. I don't know why.
Oh, that's lucky. So because I had Simon Bridges on the podcast, and he was actually very vulnerable of him. Like he said, when he was leader of the opposition, some weeks he'd be flying back to Tauranga on a Friday night, and he'd shut his eyes on the plane and just feel himself almost crying. Because it had been such a rough week. Yeah. But you never sort of felt.
Never had it. No.
Oh, that's awesome.
Never had it.
What is that? Is that a healthy ego, or?
Yeah, it must be. I don't know, overinflated ego. But I mean, I think. Look, I do things to try and de-stress stuff as much as I can. So within reason, I mean, like I always did exercise. Like when you live with police officers like I did, and they're all young and incredibly fit, it's like living with personal trainers. So we'd go down, like we'd run to the gym in the morning when we were in Wellington. We'd get up at 5:40. I have a very quick look at the phone. I would have already read the Dominion Post from the night before because it gets delivered at midnight. So I'd already read the morning paper in the evening before I went to bed. So I already knew what bad stuff was coming. Then I'd run down from Premier House to the gym in Parliament. Then we'd do 40 minutes of boxing and, all sorts. They were like personal trainers. And then we'd take the car back. I'd go back, have a shower. I'd make myself a cup of tea. And I'd walk down, get in the car, and we'd go off to work. And so I think things like exercise for me, that's why I love golf. And I've always I didn't play obviously when I was Prime Minister very much and all those things. But I think what I love about it is I love the feeling of, firstly, golf courses are generally in beautiful places anyway. And that feeling of hitting a great shot. I think I'm not a great fisherman, but I think it's like when you catch the one fish, you always want to come back. For me, I think those things do help my mental health. And I drink. I don't drink to get over stuff. I probably drink more than what I tell the doctor. But but I think reality is I actually like it. I like having a glass of wine. I find it relaxing having a glass of wine, but not in a way where I go, oh God, I need a drink. I just think, oh, it's nice. I'm having a glass of wine and we're having some cheese or watching dinner or having dinner or watching the news or whatever. I like it. But,
So February 22nd, 2011. What are your recollections of that day? Yeah, so it was, this was the
second one, eh?
Yeah, so the first one happened overnight. There's some property damage, but no.
The first one happened and I flew down. And it happened at about 3 or 4 in the morning. It was like nearer 4 than 3 from memory, but anyway, very middle of the night. And so it was incredibly lucky because actually no one was on the streets. So it did do quite a lot of damage, but no one was around to get crushed. So on the one in February. Funnily enough, actually, we were in my office. I was meeting Phil O'Reilly, who's head of Business New Zealand, and we used to meet people from say 12 to 1, or up to 1 o'clock, and then we'd prep for question time. And we were in my office, and there's this shaking, and I thought, there's yet another earthquake in Wellington, because you get quite a lot of shakes when you're there. And then the beehive is built on rubber, so it moves. So that's why it's it can withstand a Category 9 earthquake in theory. And so the building started moving. So sometimes it moves a bit because it's on that rubber, And I thought, it was a reasonable shake. And Wayne came in, opened the door, and I went, a little bit of an earthquake. He goes, yeah, but the problem was that was Christchurch. And I just, and so Phil left, and we knew pretty much early on that was a massive problem, obviously. And we started getting reports really quickly, about what was happening. So, I remember flying down. We flew down, and initially they flew me around in one of the Air Force planes. And then I got on the ground, and we got to the they'd set up the Emergency Civil Defence Centre at the art gallery, I think it was, and the art gallery is made of the museum, it's the art gallery, and it's got massive big glass windows and steel sort of thing. And the aftershocks were incredible. That's the thing I didn't really understand about major earthquakes. You just get aftershocks. And in fact, they go on for years, half the time. And these things would shake, and the noise of them shaking was like the building was going to fall down. The first one that happened, I really thought, oh, shit. And but man, it shook. And then the police commissioner was there, and he said to me, I think it was the district commander. And I said, the media are reporting about 8 people were dead or something. And he said to me, well, it's at least 50. And I said, well, are you sure about that? And he looked at me and said, well, we've counted 50 body bags. So I said, well, I'm going to say that then. And he said, yep. And we went down to Latimer Square. That's where we did all of the big, went into the newses and did all the stuff. And that's where they were setting up all of the rescue facilities there. And I remember the CTV building. Actually, it was almost an eye shot, if you like. It was just down there, and it was on fire, and I mean, it was just really awful, really, really awful. And it carried on for obviously a very, very long time with all the aftershocks and different things that went on. But, I mean, I think Jerry Brownlee actually deserves a huge amount of credit. And again, I know that, politics is just, it polarizes, and some people love and some people hate, and some people say, he has a strong personality and he was bombastic and all that sort of stuff. But actually, you needed that strength of personality and that real love of Christchurch to make it be sorted. And you can look around the world, there's so many places like New Orleans have never recovered from major disasters. I mean, look at this Hurricane Helene that's just gone through. Who knows whether they even rebuild half this stuff? Whereas, really Jerry and, I think there was a real nucleus of us, Bill and me and a couple of others, were very committed to getting Christchurch back on its feet. And I think it probably is and will be the most livable city in New Zealand because you kind of got a chance to rebuild some great things. But it was very, very tough.
Yeah, is that a hard time as a Prime Minister to lead something like that?
Yeah, well, you feel enormously for the families and people feel very vulnerable. And we did the thing that Jacinda did for COVID, which was those payments where we paid people. And honestly, to this day, I can walk down the street in Christchurch and people come up to me and they go, mate, you saved my business. Because people couldn't, it was very, we can all imagine it now because of COVID, but back then you couldn't imagine it, which was
like a wage subsidy.
Yeah, wage subsidy. You couldn't get into work, you couldn't pay people. You had no income coming in. So we just decided, right, for 16 weeks we're paying people. And we went around Treasury Advice. We did it overnight. It cost $250 million. We did all of these things, which became the blueprint for the COVID sort of wage subsidy scheme. And we did a lot of really good things there. And I remember at times when the media were running stories about, the portable toilets weren't in the right place somewhere or something, and it was like, there's so many things going on. We've got the military here. I mean, places on its knees. Okay, yeah, I get it, but that's probably not the big thing. But again, there's no point in losing your rag about it. You basically just got to go, okay, is what it is. But yeah, there were a huge number of people who did remarkable things, but oh my goodness, some of the stories. And it was just, some people were just so desperately unlucky. I remember there was a story of a guy who was walking over the Port Hills, had survived the earthquake and everything, and in an aftershock, there was a boulder came down and killed him. Or there were people literally sitting in the bus and they just got completely flattened because the facades of the building fell on them. But then there were other people who you would argue for all money, would have got killed in the quake, and the thing just missed them by an inch, and they were fine.
Yeah. So it's terrifying.
And actually, Bob Parker did a very good job. He was
he did. A very good communicator.
Yeah, he did really well.
You mentioned COVID just before. Do you think the Jacinda and the Labor government did a mostly good job? Or, I mean, you've got the unfair advantage of hindsight, but
yeah. So look, on the way in, yes. And I think actually it was a unified view that, we didn't have a vaccine, we didn't have a response, we weren't sure. The reports coming from around the world was that this could be a catastrophic thing that could wipe people out. There's a great deal of vulnerability in any community. It was the right thing to do to close New Zealand down. And it is so easy in hindsight to criticise. Look, a lot of the communication she did, all of those sorts of things. Again, she did a really good job of that. And I think the way they did the wage subsidies and all that was really good. I always said to Bronagh, I said, look, their challenge won't be how you close the place down. It'll be how you open the place up. It's the pathway out, not the pathway in. And I think in the end they really struggled, and I think they just, frankly, if you want me to be honest, I think they listened to too much official advice, and they got terrified of the fact that, unfortunately, it would claim some lives, and it did, but it was always going to be inevitable that ultimately you could never stop it being in the community. And, so many, and the way that Auckland got treated, was just, some of it was crazy. But anyway, as I say, every Prime Minister deals with difficult circumstances, and that wouldn't have been easy for them. So I'm not knocking them. And I think they did a really good job early on. I just think later on it was too much money spent later on, too much stuff that was wrong.
Yeah, I felt like we were sort of painted into a corner, really, weren't we? In a way. Why did you decide to stand down? So you were almost at the end of your third term?
Yeah, well, ironically, it wasn't because I thought I was going to lose the election. It's because I thought I was going to win another one in 4 terms.
But, were you just done? Were you exhausted or not?
I said at the time, like there's nothing left, and and I think Jacinda sort of said the same kind of things. But actually, truthfully, that probably wasn't quite right. I mean, yeah. Look, I'd had 10 years of being leader, 8 years of being Prime Minister. You're pretty, you've done a lot, so you're pretty tired. But I, if you'd said to me, you've got to carry on for another couple of years or another 3 years or whatever, it would have been fine. My concern was that eventually, even if they do love you in some form, they fall out of love with you. And it's not that you're bad or wrong or whatever, but the job forces you to make decisions. And in making those decisions, there is always a risk that you become you actually become better at it, but you might become a bit more belligerent in the way that you think, right? Secondly, you chart a pathway, and changing that pathway is really difficult because then you've got to go back and say, all these other things I did was wrong, and no one really does that. And so that's why there's changes in government, because basically people start saying, right, well, they're just they're not listening anymore, or they're on the wrong track, or they need to refresh. I'm sick of them. I'm sick of their mannerisms or whatever it is. And so what I did was I just thought, we need to refresh. If we're gonna beat Labor, we've got to out-Labor Labor by basically looking like we're fresh and we're new. And you can't do that if you don't start at the top. And I thought Bill would make an excellent Prime Minister, and I think he did. And I think, I don't want to sound like Donald Trump, but the simple reality is, under an MMP environment, Bill won the election. He polled a fantastic result. He polled 45%, and he polled an amazing result. But what we always knew was possible, that the coalition of small parties would get together and outgun us, happened. And, Winston might regret that decision now, actually, because, he didn't seem to end that relationship with Jacinda's government too well. But the reality is that so I think the strategy worked, but oh well.
What was that period like? So I've had heaps of like All Blacks and high-profile sports people on the podcast, and they talk about the almost like a drop off a cliff when
come down,
when you go from being in that sort of environment to being, I suppose, for lack of a better term, just a civilian again.
Nobody. Yeah. I mean, it is very extreme. I mean, it is literally yes, Prime Minister to hello, John. And I mean, I could have carried on with security. Wouldn't sort of violate those sort of things, but I could have, but I didn't have to, and I didn't think I needed to, so I didn't worry. But early on, of course, people thought people aren't necessarily completely in touch with you, so people still thought I was Prime Minister. And so there were a couple of times when I went out there and all of a sudden I didn't have security around me, and there were people really having a crack at me, and that was a little bit interesting. Not much, I mean, but there was a little bit.
Really? Like what sort of things?
I remember being in Courtney Place one night. And funny enough, Steffi was in New Zealand working on a movie, and I'd taken her out for dinner, and I'd put her in the cab, and then this guy just started going nuts. He was obviously drunk, and he was going nuts at me. I was thinking, maybe I got rid of security a little bit too early. Anyway, it was fine.
That wouldn't happen very often, eh? Like people are very brave online,
generally
but
they're
in
great.
person,
In
person they don't like it, they'll ignore you.
No, exactly, yeah. Look, the weird thing was, and again, you're right, because you read all these things, and the amount of depression and all of these mental health issues for ex-sports stars is incredible. Because, I mean, as you say, they go from being this period of adulation and being the person to all of a sudden what's next in my life. I mean, for me, because I sort of chose that timing, if you like, I didn't feel like that, and I didn't want to get in Bill's way. He was being Prime Minister, and I had to respect that. And so, I stayed as a backbencher and for as long as it took to avoid a by-election. But, I kept a really low profile and kept out of the way. They were nice enough to give me a great office, and that was good for a wee while. But as soon as I could, I sort of moved on. So, funnily enough, it was just like, I'm pretty good at looking forward and not looking back. Like, even when I left Merrill and, notwithstanding, I noticed I wasn't getting some massive bonus or whatever, little things like that. But then I was like, okay. And so I've just built a different life, and it's different now. And I remember people used to say to me, oh, mate, you shouldn't have retired. The phone will stop ringing. And I used to go, well, actually, I want the phone to stop ringing. But actually what's ended up happening is people have rung that I never thought would ring. Like, if I really look at, I always thought I was going to be group chairman of ANZ and chairman of Air New Zealand. And of course, when the change of government happened, obviously Winston didn't want me to be there on the board, so I was always going to be exited stage left there. And then probably by the time I could have been group chairman of ANZ, I realised the work commitment was so great I didn't want to do that. But actually, I've ended up in different places doing different things, and there's just so many organisations I've ended up being involved with that I would just never have dreamed it possible. So, yeah, I mean, it's just been such a ride. It's been such a great ride, you know. And I'm not actually a workaholic, you know. Like I like working and I like doing things and I like doing things to get my brain going. But I'm not this crazy person who wants to die in the office. I'm actually really happy doing, other fun things, whatever they might be, you know. Like I like cooking, I like travelling with Bronagh, I like doing lots of things, you know. So working's good. Yeah, it's a good thing to do, and I'm interested in it. And I'll always probably do some work, hopefully helping Max or whatever it might be. But I'm not, I'm not this person that needs. I don't need to. I suppose what I'd say is I don't need to be validated by the office that I hold, because probably in the commercial sense, nothing I'm going to do is ever going to rank with being Prime Minister. You either like me or you won't like me, or remember me or won't remember me as Prime Minister. It won't be that I was at ANZ or BHP or wherever company I might be helping.
Yeah, but I mean, to get through 3 terms and then, probably get elected for a 4th term, it's amazing, right? Yeah. Because you sort of find, how many terms did Helen get? Was it 3?
She got 3, yeah.
Yeah, by the end of term 3, people are turning on you a bit, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, and that does happen a bit like that. And then, I mean, I think, it's all hindsight. You don't know. Yeah. My guess is I would have polled about the number the Bill polled. That's what I think, 45%. I don't think it would have been much different. And Winston would never have come with me because that wasn't happening. So maybe the result might have been the same outcome. But who knows? Maybe I would have got 1% more and maybe that might have changed. But there's like so many things. Maybe I would have got 1% less. Who knows? I personally thought Bill did really well and ran a great campaign. So that's what it is.
But you left and you're at peace with your decision.
Totally, yeah. Never looked back. And the funny thing was, Bronagh's not that political, right? Like, she's a good little centre-right voter, but she's not. She doesn't want to be in front of the camera, doesn't want the limelight, isn't a political activist. And so when I told her in the January of 2016 I'm going to retire at the end of the year, she eventually said, "Oh, really?" And I went, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, okay." And then eventually she came back and she said, "Look, we've been doing this for 15 years, if you think about it." And she said, "You know me, I don't love all this stuff, and if I never saw another camera again, it would be fine by me. I don't need to read about myself in the paper or you." But she said, "Look, if you're doing it because you're worried about me, another 3 years ain't going to make any difference. So if you want to do it and, kind of win." It wasn't quite true. It was a historic 4th term because, Holyoake did it. But she said, if you want to do it, go and do it. But she said, my only request is if you're going to leave, don't go back. So I knew once I was leaving, I wasn't going back.
Yeah, what sort of impact did it have on your relationship?
Well, I think it's good, really, because you have a lot more time. I mean, like I always say to people, if you've got a bad marriage and you go into Parliament, it's definitely going to blow up. If you've got a good one, it'll probably survive. But it's not easy. I mean, Parliament is not an easy environment. I mean, she would say, I think if Bronagh was here, that she really, was basically a solo mother for 8 years. I mean, I was away and busy. I actually think I was there a bit more than, no one was going to agree with me on this statement, but I think I was there a bit more than what Max might tell you I was. He would tell you, "Oh, you're never there, and you even know what day my birthday is," and oh my goodness gracious.
No, that's on the podcast we did. He sort of suggested that, but he did. It seems like you did it as well as what you could possibly do in managing like family life and work life. But it's a big job. And you can't sit there and go, "Oh, I know you're having this crisis, whatever it might be. Could be economic crisis, political crisis, natural disaster," and say, "Oh, by the way, I'm a little bit busy this afternoon because the kids are doing something." You are locked and loaded. And actually everybody knows that. And it might not even be a crisis. It's just like, it's Saturday night and you spent all day and you've been out doing a variety of different things around the country, and now you're going to the breast cancer ball and you're going as the person of, the important person that's here because you're Prime Minister, and it's an incredibly important charity that does great work. You might be exhausted and want to stay home Saturday night and watch a movie, but it doesn't work like that. And everybody understands it. And I always tried to go and say, "Look, I'm just going to..."
there is no point in me feeling sorry for myself because no one is going to feel sorry for me, nor should they, because, by the way, I signed up to this and I knew what it was like. And you might not know every element, but you pretty much know what you're doing. So I never did. I just got on with it and did it and tried to enjoy it and make the most of it. And, man, you see and experience some incredible things, and some of them are really surprising. You know, some of them you expect to be incredible, and some of them you don't think they will be, and they're amazing. And I think it was Helen Clark who said it, but it's, I used to say it all the time. You see the very best and the worst of New Zealand, but mostly it's the very best.
Yeah, can we draw down on some of them? You've been so generous with your time. Have you got a tiny bit more?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like holidaying with the Queen.
Yeah, well, that was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was a truly remarkable person, and it was kind of special because I think I was the first Australasian Prime Minister that had been asked to go there and with the family and the whole thing. I mean, being at Balmoral and just she just the time to spend with her one-on-one where she would just, like I remember we were at lunch one time and I was looked at something and I said, oh, that's really cool. It's like I think it was like a little salt and pepper shaker thing. She said, oh, yeah, it was Queen Victoria's. But she just talked through a million of things. She'd had some of the stories she told me and experiences she had. And I think they know there's a bond of trust. And they're quite open. Like she would say to me people she liked and people she didn't like because she knew I would never repeat it and I never would.
Until this podcast.
Until this podcast, yeah, I know. Even now, I'd better not. But yeah, she was truly remarkable. But the whole experience, I mean, that was just totally surreal. I mean, you know, doing all of that and being there.
But when you were hanging out together, like in a holiday home, you call her Majesty, or
yeah? Well, the protocol is they call her Her Majesty, and like even Will and Kate came that weekend, and they would stand up when she came into the room the first time in the morning and go Your Majesty, and after that it's Mum.
Wow, what memories!
Yeah, no,
oh my God,
they're amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah, they were crazy. Yeah, no, and I mean the room that Max slept in, every room has portraits in Downing Street. If you watch Love Actually, I think it's got it in you go up and there's a big yellow wall and it's got portraits of Prime Minister. They always do them in black and white and then they sign them. They do 2 copies, and one copy was on that wall in Downing Street, and the other one was at Balmoral, and he slept in the room under Winston Churchill. When the Winston Churchill signed. Yeah. It was
and Obama. Yeah. So you played golf with Obama. Did you have sort of a friendship with him?
Yeah, no, we very much so, yeah.
Or was that a transactional sort of thing?
No, it was I think it was more than that. I think I was trying to say to people, look, it sounds a bit weird and a bit sort of, a bit like I'm tooting my own horn. But the reality is if you go to something like APEC, there are 20 leaders. 10 of them probably don't speak English. 5 of them you might not want to mix with, and 3 of them are new. So, in the end, like I like sport, he likes golf, I was around a long time. We came in at exactly the same time. We were exactly the same age. Like there were just a lot of things that we had in common. So, yeah, he was great. I mean, actually, economically wise, I didn't necessarily agree with his policy. I'm much more free market and more right wing and all that sort of stuff. But he was incredible. Like he was some of their experiences. But in the end, when you're on the golf course and you're talking about what's going on, without being silly, that New Zealand's just a small version of what they've got. Yeah, they've got different issues. I mean, I think actually the United States at the moment has probably never been more divided, and some of their issues are much more extreme, and we don't really have those here, which is great. Like the gun issues as a general rule, or their focus on abortion. Thank goodness it's a sort of settled issue in New Zealand. But the point is that outside of that, though, you're still dealing with all of the same kinds of issues, really. Because at the core of it, leadership from a government point of view, whether you're Prime Minister or President, is all about allocation of resources. It's how much resources do you take off the masses to pay for the things that you want to allocate them to. And whether it's the provision of policing services or healthcare or education, whatever, they're all the same issues. It doesn't matter whether your country is 350 million people or 5 million. It's the same thing. Yeah, I understand the leader of the free world, and it's some things are much more important from his perspective. It always used to make me laugh when the media would say John Key is with other world leaders today. I used to go, well, okay. In my head, I used to go, not quite sure I'm a world leader, but but I'm there with some people you might describe as a world leader.
Arguably,
yeah. But anyway, it's But yeah, that was really remarkable. And he's incredible. I asked him once, actually, I said, could you always speak, could you always speak like that? And he said to me, look, you got to remember Martin Luther King wasn't the first person who could speak like this. Yeah. He said he was the first person that the American media probably really discovered and exposed, if you like. And he said, I grew up in a lot of different churches and things where he said I could show you 50 people that speak like that. And funnily enough, actually, I watched the Republican convention and quite a bit of the Democratic convention. I think it was at the Democratic convention, I'm going to get it wrong, but the guy who spoke, he was the governor for, I don't know, I'm going to say North Carolina or one of those states anyway. And if you closed your eyes, you would have sworn to God it was Obama. Wow. He was just a fantastic speaker. But you look at Obama, no one can deliver a prepared speech like him, and it's partly about, next time if you're interested, go and watch a YouTube video of him, and when he gives a statement or says a sentence, he doesn't do what normal people do, which is read in a slow way. He doesn't go, today the weather in Auckland is wet. He goes, it's wet in Auckland today. And then he stops for an interminable period of time. It's about 5 or 6 seconds. Partly because of the sound bites, but partly because of the way it works. And he said when he gave that famous speech at the Democratic convention, the very one that really launched him on the stage, and he later on became a senator and then president. He said when I was walking out, they told me they're going to clap like crazy when they do. Just keep talking because it'll sound even more impressive when you see it.
There's lots of little tricks.
He's a brilliant orator.
Yeah.
Actually, William Hague was as well. William Hague was and is a brilliant speaker. Different version, different style, but brilliant. And it's sort of living proof Question Time doesn't count for anything because he used to monster Tony Blair in Question Time and still lost the election, but he was a brilliant speaker.
Are you still in touch now? Like, do you exchange texts?
Yeah. He's mostly when he's over there, he's in a different island from us. But yeah. I mean, not every day and all that sort of stuff. I probably see David Cameron more than anyone else. This one actually for dinner a few weeks ago. But yeah, no, he's in great form, David.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's another photo I wanted to run past you because I've met you several times. And you're just a normal sized man.
Yeah.
And there's this photo of you and Sam Whitelock.
I know. Yeah, it's crazy that picture, eh? Yeah.
Is that an angle thing? He's not that big, is he?
He is pretty damn big. It looked like I was a hobbit, eh? And he looks colossal and I look like this tiny little... But it must have been... I don't think they did something weird with the lens. I think he literally was the angle they could. I was in the All Black changing room. Hell of a nice guy, actually. Great All Black man. He's just more caps than anyone else, isn't it? But
and that same day, that was the...
Oh, yeah, the three-way handshake. By the way, that was not my fault. As I said, I was actually going up there to give Richie the cup, and I was looking at Richie in the eyes, and so I wasn't looking at Bernard Lapissé, who was the head of the Rugby Football Union. And for whatever reason, weirdly, he decided he was going to shake hands at the same time. And so I was looking and I just put my hand out. And as I was doing it, Richie's hand was going to mine, but then I felt this hand on the top. And then it was like, you have this sort of surreal experience where you're not quite sure what to do, whether you should pull your hand back or keep on going. And I sort of stayed there for a bit, and then I thought, this is a bit weird. And when I came off the stage, I thought, gee, I wonder whether anyone would notice. And then I sat there and thought, well, there's probably about 1 billion people watched it. I reckon someone will probably pick up on it.
Is it embarrassing or funny?
Oh, it was quite funny. But what happened was, it didn't get a lot of coverage because everyone was euphoric about winning the World Cup until the next day. I think the Herald or someone ran a story in the paper where they had a picture like that picture there, and then just a little story about it. Then it just blew up. And then for the rest of the time I was Prime Minister, everywhere I went, you'd see 2 guys, and as soon as you saw 2 guys standing next to each other, you knew what was happening next. And they thought they were so funny because they thought they were the first person to have ever done it. I go, mate, I know. Yeah,
not my first rodeo.
Not my first rodeo. Particularly on campus, when I used to go on campus.
You'd always oblige, though?
Oh, yeah. Well, I couldn't stop it, really.
What about Don McGlashan? Have you ever met Don
McGlashan? You famously said rather have sex with a crayfish, which I thought was a really odd analogy. Never really sort of heard that one, actually. And not something I've ever envisaged having sex with a crayfish. But yeah, he said. But you used to get a lot of those sort of people. To be honest, in the world of arts and entertainment, they're more biased towards the left than the right. You know what I mean? You'll get some people that are different. In fact, I watched Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or something on Fox News this morning talking about how he was right wing. But as a general rule, it's not going to come as a shock to people that Taylor Swift is more left wing. No. So you take it all with a bit of a grain of salt. But yeah, it was weird because I don't think I'd ever met him. But yeah, it was sort of weird. I remember there were lots of people. I think Eleanor Catton had a real go at me once, and I thought, that's a bit weird because I just hosted them for the book prize, and it was sort of odd.
Does that sort of hurt, like on a deeper sort of level? Does it sort of hurt a little bit? Yeah, well, it's sort of more. It's kind of frustrating because you'd sort of sit there and go, it doesn't. You're coming at it from a preconditioned view and predetermined view, and I'm. Am I really the thing that you're sort of saying? Like, we did put lots of money to the arts, and we did, all that sort of stuff. And I remember when Eleanor was doing that, we had said all these great things because she won the Booker Prize, and so we'd put out a statement and all that sort of stuff. And then she had one go, and I think she might have had a second go. And when she had the second go, a lot of me wanted to say something, and I just bit my tongue and said, yeah, that's what it is. So I kind of get it. I understand that. I mean, it sort of is what it is. But you get it both ways. I also get a lot of people like, people like Richie McCaw and Dan Carter, who carried a lot of weight, would come out and say really nice things about me, or, Kieran Reid, a lot of the All Blacks, a lot of the sports. And, I remember when Michael Jones and Inga Tuigamala went out and campaigned for me in 2008 in South Auckland. We didn't even know they were coming. They literally came because they wanted to come, and they believed that we could make a difference for Pacific people, young people in South Auckland. So, you get it both ways. You just go, but it's just frustrating if you know who you are as a person, and and people have sort of misconstrued you or taken you the wrong way. Like it's never nice.
Well, also if you think about the movie industry, it's really interesting. But Richard Taylor, who ran Weta Workshops with Peter Jackson, but Peter obviously, but Richard, I went to a lunch. He was there. And actually, it was just before Jacinda resigned, and Jacinda came over and said something to me. And when I think back on it, because I was quite surprised when she resigned, I should have picked up on it, on something she said to me. If I was thinking straight, I should have picked up on it.
What did she say?
Oh, she was just coming over to thank me because I'd supported her on something. There was an internal affairs issue they were looking at, and they'd run all the former prime ministers for a thing. But I'd obviously said, look, what she's saying is right, and she needs, support for that. And I said I'd publicly support her if it was required. And she's come over to thank me for it. But in hindsight, anyway, it's no big deal. But Richard got up, and he gave this speech where at the start of the speech he just said, "I'm never going to forget what you did. You saved the movie industry in New Zealand. You funded the Hobbits. You've sold the issues. You changed the law. You took all the flack about the definition of a contractor and blah blah blah. And none of this would have happened if you hadn't done that. And that was a long time afterwards. And you think about the audience that he would have been talking to lots and lots of times, because I've heard him say that before. He never forgot, and he always said it, even when there were lots of people who would have fundamentally been left wing wouldn't have agreed with it. And so that was what I always thought was a bit odd, was that our government did do a lot actually because I always believed not everyone's going to want to be an accountant or a currency trader or whatever. There are lots of people interested in the arts, and we want to support that. Yeah. And it wasn't political. It was just, I thought people come from all different walks of life, different strokes, different interests. So hey, why not do that? So. But I kind of get it, it is what it is. I mean, people have views, and as I said earlier, I never used to take things too personally, and I just move on.
Oh, yeah, one of the big things, the ponytail thing.
Oh yeah.
What was it? Was that just I've got uncles that sort of used to pat me on the head. Was it like that?
Yeah. It's not even worth reliving all of it, except to say we were literally doing what we were doing, which was kidding around. But if you look at it, you'd have to say, I was doing that, and it was a bit of a laugh, and there are some extenuating circumstances, but if you think about it, I shouldn't have done it. And you know, it was never meant to be anything more than that. And you know, the media sort of ran all these stories. You know, there's some stories of me with a couple of kids, but if you do that,
all of the montages.
Yeah, but you do. But you know, like kids with ponytails. You know, like I mean, that's everyone does that. I mean, Steffi used to wander around with a ponytail, and you know, there's just you're just mucking around. You know, so I don't know. I mean, yeah, it was what it was, but again, it was all sort of part of a personality of just having a bit of a laugh and not taking myself too seriously. And so as much as I might want to change that, I don't probably want to change a million different things I did that were all part of that personality trait of being up for a bit of a laugh and being, you know, and so that was bad, but then the other things were good, and if you put it all together, you just have to take the good with the bad.
And if you start to overthink everything, then you lose the essence of who you are as a person, right?
Yeah. And but I, you know, there's certain times where you think, okay, well, you realise if you sat there in cold light of day, you wouldn't have done it.
But are you proud of yourself?
I am, yeah. They always say, you know, the judge of a good prime minister is whether they leave the country in better shape than they found it. And it's a totally subjective thing. I mean, it's like what I think or you think or somebody else thinks might be very different to, you know, huge number of people who listen to your podcast. And some people who listen to it will go, he sure as hell didn't. And some people will say, he sure as hell did, right?
Yeah, there's some people that will say you wrecked the country, no doubt.
Yeah, it's what you see, see. It's like political debates. I mean, that debate with Biden and Trump will go down in history for one of the very few debates that actually had massive consequences, and that Biden stood down after that because he was, you know, struggling, and it became apparent for everyone to see it. But actually, as a general rule, they don't move anything. And the reason is, if I watched that debate yesterday with J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, I think J.D. Vance gave a masterclass and was fantastic. Why? Because I'm right wing. And I want to like J.D. Vance, and I like the way he said what he said, right? But if you are a Democrat voter, you'd say Tim Walz is a nice guy and he did a really good job. So you see what you want to see. But I personally think that we went from having a GFC that we inherited in 2008 to leaving as the rock star economy, and we kept debt under control. And I look at, say, the way debt blew out under the previous Labor government and think generations of New Zealanders are going to be paying for that, and for a very long time. I think we've got a lot to be proud of with our government. And it wasn't just economic. I think we did a lot of things in lots of different places, like I said, in the arts sector, or, you know, a lot of stuff that we dealt with and built a huge amount of infrastructure. I just did a lot of different things. And I think we tried to build national confidence and national, and in a sense that New Zealand was really doing well, and people wanted to be here, which is why migration numbers turned around and more New Zealanders started coming to, or Australians started coming to New Zealand than New Zealanders going to Australia. So it's all about ambition. So, yeah, I mean, like I say, it's for every Prime Minister will be the same. If you had it all again, would there be some things you did differently? Yeah, of course there would be. But you don't live in that perfect world. You live in the real world, which is stuff's getting thrown at you every 5 minutes.
And legacy?
Yeah, everyone thought I wanted the flag as the legacy, which I didn't. I wanted the flag because I wanted to build that national identity, or that something we could coalesce around. That's obviously the silver fern. In hindsight, I should have just done it. I didn't need 61 votes.
Yeah, I think that the whole thing was confusing. It was almost like an X Factor sort of elimination thing.
Exactly. You should have just done it. That's what they did in Canada, and they ended up with a bloody great flag, which is the maple leaf. So yeah, legacy. I think that there's no question, if you put a gun to someone's head and said one word, you know, John Key's government, I think people would say economic, right? Like, we were an economically focused government. I'm kind of an economically focused guy. And people elected us because they thought we'd be good with money. The more Labor went on about me being some rich fat cat, the more the punter just heard, oh, he's quite good with money for himself, so hopefully he'll be good with us, right? So you got to accept all that. So for me, I think the legacy was that we were just a much stronger, vibrant economy at the end of all that. And so yeah, I'm personally really proud of that, and I think we had a great team. And we did a lot of good things, and so yeah, as I say, like I might change the odd thing, but it wouldn't change much.
Well, I asked ChatGPT.
What did say?
well, we've heard what you think. Let's see what artificial intelligence. John Key is often regarded as a successful and popular Prime Minister of New Zealand, though opinions about his leadership are mixed depending on one's political perspective.
Yeah, there you go.
His tenure also had significant social and economic challenges that continue to shape debates about his legacy. Yeah.
Pretty good.
$1 each way.
Yeah, pretty good.
Hey, this has been fun.
Good. Glad you enjoyed it.
I've really, really enjoyed it. I'm so grateful for you being so generous with your time.
Yeah, no problems. I hope some of you listeners get through the whole time. I don't know. It's been a long car trip if they do. But anyway.
Oh no. Well, that's what I like about long form podcasts. You can listen till you get bored. But I've got no doubt that
And people probably come in and out of them. I suspect what they do. I mean, podcasts I think are amazing. Max listens to lots of podcasts more than I do. I listen to some, but yeah, I find them. Hopefully at the end of it, you have a sense of what makes a person tick.
Yeah,
and that's all you're really trying to do. And I think if you can do that, then you come away a richer person because you understand at least their perspective. And actually, the fact that you might not agree with that perspective is no bad thing. It's just your view of the world, and we're all different, and that's what makes us a great country and society.
Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed this, and I think there's a lot of insights into you as a person, politics aside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Sir John Key. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.